Hey, kid. I gotta record, okay?
Well, hey there, idiots. Welcome back to Observe, and welcome to the final video of the spooky month here. And in today's video, it's going to be centered around a true crime case that happened on Halloween. More on that in just a second. Let's go ahead and roll that intro first. Alright, so apologies in advance. This is not going to be your longest episode. I'm going out of town this weekend, and I would like to be able to do so without having to make a huge hour-long video. Also, the studio door is open, so you may or may not see my puppy come in and out of here while I am recording this. So, just wanted to go ahead and run those things, but now let's go ahead and provide a bit of a backstory to this video's case. On Halloween night, 2011, in the quiet suburban city of Manteca, California, police officers responded to a welfare check that would quickly become a homicide investigation. The call came in at about 6 o'clock that evening. The address was a modest single-story home on the 800 block of Golden Pond Drive. Neighbors had grown concerned. The woman who lived there, 54-year-old Kathleen McGehee, hadn't been seen all day. When officers entered the residence, they discovered a scene that would haunt even the most seasoned investigators. Kathleen was found dead inside her home, lying in a pool of blood. She had been stabbed repeatedly, 10 times total, with wounds concentrated in the neck, chest, and abdomen regions.
I'm working, baby boy. I am. I sure am.
According to the official appellate record in People v. McGehee, 8 of those wounds were independently fatal. Evidence at the scene indicated no forced entry, and there were no signs of a struggle consistent with an outside intruder. It appeared that whoever had killed Kathleen had been allowed inside the home willingly, and likely it was somebody that she trusted. By the next morning, police had identified their possible suspect, her son, Dawson Andrew McGehee, 26 years old, unemployed at the time, and living with his mother. Officers located him around 2 o'clock in the morning of November 1st, driving his mother's car near North Main Street and Louise Avenue. He was taken into custody without any incident. From the very start, the case drew attention because of its timing, a brutal killing discovered on Halloween night, and because of Dawson's reported fixation with Halloween masks and horror imagery. According to court testimony and official statements, he collected masks and occasionally wore them around the house and even out in public. That detail would later feed both the public narrative and his defense's claims about his mental state. Following his arrest, McGehee was charged under California Penal Code Section 187 for the murder of his mother. As the case moved through the courts, prosecutors described it as an unprovoked act of extreme violence.
She had a constellation of stab wounds consistent with what we have traditionally called an overkill.
The defense painted a very different picture, one of mental illness and possible delusion. In court filings, defense attorneys claimed that Dawson suffered from hallucinations and delusions at the time of the killing. They argued that he genuinely believed his mother had been overtaken by a demonic force, which was relevant in that the family itself was a Christian family. During interviews and psychiatric evaluations, he reportedly described seeing a dark, supernatural figure and claimed that he was defending himself from evil. The prosecution, however, pointed to several key facts that seemed to contradict this claim. First, Dawson attempted to conceal the crime after the fact. According to police testimony, he misled relatives about his mother's whereabouts, telling them that she had gone to the store or was resting, even though she was already dead inside the home. Investigators interpreted this as evidence of consciousness of guilt, showing that he understood that what he had done was wrong and was attempting to avoid detection. Along with this, the autopsy findings supported the theory of intent rather than confusion. The stab wounds were precise and forceful, concentrated in vital areas suggesting purposeful attacks rather than erratic or uncertain motion. The trial began in 2013, and the courtroom quickly became a clash between psychiatric theory and prosecutorial logic. During the proceedings, jurors heard from forensic psychologists, police officers, and the medical examiner. The defense called multiple experts to discuss Dawson's alleged mental health conditions. The prosecution cross-examined each of them, emphasizing inconsistencies in his statements and the absence of a formal diagnosis prior to the murder. After deliberation, the jury did indeed find Dawson McGehee guilty of murder, but the legal process was not finished there. Due to the presence of the mental health claims, the court had to hold a separate follow-up sanity phase to determine whether he was legally insane at the time of the killing. Following a substantially shorter deliberation period, that jury also returned a decisive verdict. He was completely sane. Court documents and contemporaneous reporting confirm that jurors agreed McGehee understood both the nature and the wrongfulness of his act. The defense's attempt at a demon narrative did not convince them that he lacked awareness or control. On January 29th of 2013, Dawson McGehee was sentenced to 15 years to life in state prison. The sentence reflected a second-degree murder conviction, meaning that the court found intent to kill, but not necessarily premeditation. Surprisingly, Dawson's family was rather disappointed that the crime had not merited the level of first-degree murder. While the criminal case concluded, the circumstances around it continued to raise uncomfortable questions with the justice system. Later news reporting revealed that the San Joaquin County Sheriff's interference in autopsies had delayed the examination of Kathleen's body. The forensic pathologist testified that the delay and subsequent refrigeration made determining an exact time of death next to, if not completely, impossible. Although that issue did not overturn McGee's conviction, it did end up raising broader concerns about evidence handling and the reliability of certain local investigations. For the community of Manteca, the case left a permanent scar, a Halloween that would be forever remembered not for costumes or candy, but for a mother's murder and a son's descent into violence. Today, Dawson McGehee remains incarcerated, serving his life sentence in California's state prison system. He is eligible for parole consideration in just a few short years here in 2028, depending on conduct and rehabilitation reviews. This is yet another case where the body may reveal a good deal more than the spoken word. And now, with all of these verified facts and established historical evidence and everything like that under our belt, let's dive into the brief analysis portion of this video.
When the investigators brought Dawson in for questioning,
he would suddenly start fidgeting and having some jerking body movements and doing weird things with his hands.
Almost like he had Parkinson's disease.
Despite the shaking, Dawson did manage to deny having anything to do with his mother's death.
So there's something that the gentleman noted there. As he walked in, he said that Dawson suddenly started doing, and this is something that I wasn't able to track down in visual form, but I was able to track down reports of, is that Dawson seemed to amplify his symptoms, his mental health symptoms, when people were in the room. But when he was by himself or alone, secluded, those symptoms seem to fade off, which then is brought up in other areas by other experts of oftentimes in these situations, people with mental health conditions don't parade, as they put it, they do not parade their symptoms for the sake of attention or for having people look at them, things like that. But that seemed to be specifically what Dawson was doing.
Most often, mentally ill people don't parade their symptoms in front of you.
And that led Dr. Trumpeter to an inescapable conclusion.
In my opinion, he was faking.
Now, something else that I want to be able to make note of is the movements that Dawson is doing there. You see him doing some things with his hand here, and he's looking around rather peculiarly. Wow. He's looking around strangely, And with that, the lady thereafter says that it might look like Parkinson's. Possibly, there are different manifestations, especially physically, of these various conditions. However, I do find his movements a little bit more methodical and intentional than what I have noticed in other Parkinson's patients. That being said, there are exclusions, but I did want to make note of that, the fact that he's staying so steady with the movements. I have some questions, and I wouldn't take just that short blip and be like, oh, well, obviously this is Parkinson's, because to me that doesn't necessarily line up. Now we're about to get to a very short period here where he's asked a question, and we'll talk about what we see.
We're talking about what happened to your mom.
What happened to my mom?
Well, you tell me.
People call me and said something happened at home. Mom, they were very bad.
Mm-hmm.
What happened to my mom?
Pausing this here because I want to make note, the only traceable diagnoses that I was able to find for certain from Dawson is that he has ADHD, which that's not how ADHD manifests, especially as somebody who has ADHD. This has never been part of that. So I don't think that the ADHD is an adequate reason for what he's displaying there. But then something else that I find fascinating is that when the detective brings up his mother, initially you could see an ever so slight, and it's very hard to see with this resolution as well, an ever so slight head movement no from Dawson. Now that's super small head movement. I would consider it a micro movement there that feels like it might be more of a subconscious leak or seepage than an intentional move. So I have questions of whether or not this might be him reacting authentically to that. That little no shake could be, I don't want to respond to this. I'm not interested in responding to this. Then thereafter, as the detective continues on forward while talking about this, what I find fascinating about Dawson's nonverbal communication with that is that his pattern doesn't break. He doesn't intensify on any level. And the methodology of nonverbal communication reading that I go through, it relies heavily on spikes from a baseline. And so that can have some leniency for various mental health conditions. If a person normally fidgets a lot, that's part of their baseline. So if you see that still increase to even further, it's still a red flag. Or if you see it freeze, a negative spike, then that's still a red flag. So as this is continuing forward here, and he's being presented with this question that he's had a small micro no shake towards, his movements, his gestures that he's doing there, albeit erratic and rather strange, they do not shift on any level despite the shift in tone of questioning, things like that. So to me, that pushes me towards feeling like this is still part of an act rather than his normal natural movements. I will also say the available footage to the public of this interrogation is extremely limited. I spent ages trying to track down a full interrogation, and I was unable to. The only footage I was able to track down was through the form of another documentary series. And so there's very little, and it's rather cut up. You can hear some people talking over it, but even still, as you can see, there's still some that we can get from this. So far already we've established from the detective, he said that when he came into the room that these tics, these nonverbal movements that seemed rather erratic or nonsensical, they increased in both frequency and level degree. And then on top of that, we saw the little micro movement no when he was presented with this topic of his mother. And then as that continued forward, we noticed that there was no straying from his baseline, regardless of the implications of that specific line of questioning being more intensified. It had more psychological implications behind it, so you would expect to see a shift in nonverbal communication as he registers this, but he didn't at all. Now, this could, again, be explained through a number of mental health conditions or disorders, but as he had not received any of that prior to this, despite maybe an ADHD diagnoses, then I am less encouraged to believe that this would be due to a mental health situation that I'm not aware of, or that kind of strays outside of these loose nonverbal rules that I'm speaking of here. Regardless, we only have a little bit here to go.
He just said that he got some phone messages from his brother that something happened to mom and he needed to come home.
That's what Dawson claimed, but the investigators soon noticed something that contradicted his denials.
When I had the patrol officer bring him back to the police department, I had him collect the clothing that he was wearing, a black leather jacket. There were some stains on that that black colored jacket that appeared that they may be blood. And when I started asking more questions, he asked if he should have a lawyer.
I would offer it. I want to ask you anything. You want to ask for an attorney? Yeah.
At that point, I have to.
So fascinatingly, again with that, we hear that stutter, that stammer come in there. What I find fascinating is that you don't see the strain that oftentimes will accompany a genuine stutter or stammer. Now, again, this is very low resolution and there are always exceptions. Everybody has more of a spectrum of representation than black and whites that we're trying to paint out in YouTube videos. But even with that, we're still not seeing as this has been presented to him, these different aspects have been presented to him, we're not seeing a straying from that baseline. He's still maintaining the exact same movements, the exact same head movements. The speed of his hand is about the same. We're not seeing anything straying from that, despite there being psychological, possibly perceivable threats, even verbally acknowledged, in that he's like, maybe I should be getting a lawyer in his way that he's presenting it. Non-verbally speaking, again, he's staying consistent. Now, that incongruency is another red flag to me. Again, this would be an area that you would expect to see some psychological response to this setup, especially since the verbal has already offered a response, but we're not. And again, to me, that pushes me to believe that the physical that's being presented here, the way he's speaking, the way he's presenting himself, I believe that all of this is intentionally orchestrated due to the lack of straying from the baseline in areas that would encourage that to be done. It's another red flag of absence rather than of something being present. I hope that makes sense.
At that point, I have to respect his rights, and I stopped with any questioning.
Between the apparent bloodstain, what he'd told his sister about their mother sleeping in, and the fact that he'd been...
So if you don't remember in the beginning of this, the little debriefer where I said that he had tried to pull the wool over the eyes of a relative, it was his sister. And the way that this went is that his sister had something the morning of Halloween that she needed to go to and attend, and it was something at a bank. She apparently had an appointment at a bank. And so her mom was supposed to take her, and she went to knock on her mom's door. It was locked. She couldn't get in. But her brother, Dawson here, he sent her a text message saying, hey, mom's is sleeping in. She didn't sleep well last night, so she's going to sleep into the afternoon or so. I'll take you to the bank, which is what encouraged jurors and the general courtroom and public opinion to see that if he had not known that killing her was wrong, if this was insanity, it was something that he had done, didn't understand, then he would not have known to try to cover it up the way he did. At that moment, when he had sent that message to his sister, he had already stabbed his mother 10 times in the torso and neck. So that gave people enough grounds to stand on to say that he knew what he was doing and that it was wrong and that he tried to cover it up. That ended up navigating around a lot of that insanity plea that he was trying to go for. So that's a little bit of that context with what he had said to his sister.
And the fact that he'd been home alone with Kathleen at roughly the time she had been killed. The police placed Dawson under arrest for murder. At trial, Dawson exhibited none of the bizarre symptoms that had been on display during his interrogation.
He had dropped the twitching and movements, and he basically just sat there stone-faced throughout the trial.
And that's another complex area. You see, again, some weird, very intentional manipulators that he's doing there with his hands. These do not have nonverbal reasonings behind them. And again, I think that's because this entire thing was orchestrated. And then say, for instance, it was something like Parkinson's, like the lady had mentioned. Well, that wouldn't change like that in a courtroom. A person with Parkinson's doesn't get to choose when they have the effects of Parkinson's. It's there. And so for him to be able to step into a courtroom and everything be perfectly fine, and he could just sit there very still and calm and collected and stone-faced as they presented it, again leads me even further down that avenue of this was all orchestrated. Now, his family also believes that he was play acting all of this and that he set all of this up intentionally on Halloween to try to get this sort of insanity plea if he did happen to get caught, which he did get caught and he didn't get the plea, and now he's in prison and optimistically should stay there beyond 2028 when his parole is re-up for consideration. But I know that this was a shorter video here on Halloween. I hope that you have a good holiday tomorrow. Stay safe out there. Enjoy your candy and all of the stuffs and parties and whatnot. But yeah, try to take care of yourselves too. I hope you enjoyed this short video about a rather brutal true crime case on Halloween. But without further ado, that's all that I've got for the day. My name is Logan, and you have been oh so awesome as you always are, and I will see you in the next video. Cheers, guys.